According to this, we are. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Chair Loyal. Had the minutes been distributed yet?
Dr. Jones, Mr. Chair, and members of the Town Center Update team, the Director of Planning failed to get the minutes completed and reviewed, so my apologies. That means you'll have a bonus round in February, so you'll see two.
Thank you.
So my apologies to you. I guess the holidays kind of left a little bit of a hangover, so to speak, so thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Terry. Are there any public comments signed up? People signed up for that, Terry? Has anybody signed up for comments? Are there any public comments at the start of the meeting? Hearing none, we'll go to the item 4 on the agenda, the explanation of the meeting materials by the department.
Thank you, Dr. Jones. Mr. Chair and members of the Town Center Update team, as has been our typical practice since we started this process, now just about a year ago, we take this opportunity, Terry and I, to kind of go over the materials that you received first on Friday via email and internet access to the city's website, and now tonight in paper form. I think I'll start with maybe the easier items. As was requested by team members, two things we always provide each month is the score sheet, so to speak, on the decisions this team has made relative to the town center plan, and that's this document here. And we try to reflect the changes each month, and as you can see, there were decisions made at the last meeting in December before the holiday, and they are now reflected on our score sheet. The second item is our timeline. And as you know, we are making progress. The progress, I think, has been appropriate and in some regards surprising given the nature of the topic, the importance of the decisions, and just the size of our group, and trying to get all of us to participate and come to a consensus. So I applaud you for that. But again, this is that document. And as you can see, we've taken it out now to April in terms of what I would consider working meetings. That's not a hard line. Again, if we need more time, we can certainly accomplish that with your all's permission. But at some point, we'll reach a point where we need to go out to the public with our engagement, which will include some open houses and some other ideas that we're going to put forth to you very shortly, maybe starting in February. The strength of any plan is the support of the community, and without that support and understanding, we've been kind of working in a vacuum. So I think the best thing I can say is the public input may be last in line, but it may be one of the most important steps. So those are our two standard items. Tonight we have 3 charges before us, and the first relates to Generations Drive. It was a topic of discussion at our December meeting. There are a number of questions raised, and so I want to kind of give you some information, some updates, and then also kind of pass the buck to the February meeting. That's the first item. The second is the conclusion, at least from the department's perspective, of our discussion on the regulating plan. We had a very complete and thorough discussion, a lot of good ideas at the December meeting regarding the area on Crestview Drive, what would be Main Street, etc. And so we've done the task that you assigned, and we'll go over the results of that information. And then finally tonight, we'd like to touch upon the list of land use activities that can be considered in the regulating plan land use districts. And so remember, The downtown district isn't a downtown district until you put uses in it that can be considered for the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council. So that's the packet of information for tonight's meeting. And Terry and I'd be glad to answer any questions if you have regarding the information that you received on Friday and tonight in the folder. So thank you. I'm going to try to do it off the iPad tonight, so bear with me. There may not be the exact alignment, but hopefully we'll do the best we can to make it work and understandable for all of you. So tonight, Terry and I have two charges we'd like to present to you. Further discussion on the improvements from Generations Drive to Manchester Road, and then also an exhibit that's been prepared regarding Generations Drive in the vicinity of the access point the community college has onto it. There are a couple of other items that were promised, and those will be available and discussed in February. The first was the traffic signal at Route 109 and New College Avenue. And there were questions about the timing, why there seems to be less of a delay when you're on Route 109, but you stage a long time on New College Avenue. And so we were going to contact MoDOT via our Department of Public Works, and there was a request to have our Director of Public Works, Rick Brown, here to speak to some issues as well. And he will be available in February, and so we anticipate having the information from MoDOT, plus Mr. Brown here to kind of go over it with the team members. The second item related to the expansion plans of the community college. And we are working on that, and we anticipate having that answer in a couple of weeks, well in advance of our meeting in February. So we appreciate your patience on those two, but having Mr. Brown here and accurate information obviously sometimes takes a little bit more time to make all the arrangements. So first, I want to just kind of recap what we talked about at the last meeting. Generations Drive is a new street for all intents and purposes. It was a collaborative effort between the Wildwood Family YMCA, Wildwood Square, the community college, the developer of Meadows of Wildwood in the city of Meadows of Wildwood, and the city of Wildwood. For all intents and purposes, it was designed not to just have a single access point. And as we talked, there is an agreement between St. Louis Community College that when they move from Phase 1 to Phase 2, that blue line in the large yellow circle that Terry's provided for you will be the access from the community college property north to Manchester Road. The primary access point was one that was developed as part of Generations Drive and New College Avenue, and that is the smaller red circle. And that's an area, again, where we'll be looking at timing of the traffic signal, capacity, meaning level of service. And when I say level of service, it's just like a report card. You can have a level of service A and you can have a level of service F, and they're exactly what you got in school, meaning an F isn't good. And so we'll have that information available for you. And then a lot of our conversation, at least from the public comment session, was about Generations Drive and the community college access point. And there were concerns about safety, capacity, and just the number of trips out of the community college, creating the delay on New College Avenue to get to State Route 109, whether you're going north or south. Turkey Track Road is a rural road at this point in time and is right out only. So we spent some time discussing that. There is a development proposal on that tract of land that now is blown up. I wish I had a pointer, but that 5-acre vacant tract immediately south of Wildwood Family YMCA. It is a multiple family proposal. There was an informal presentation to a group of elected officials and appointed officials, and for all intents and purposes, if that does proceed forward, improvements to all or a portion of Turkey Track Road will be the responsibility of the development entity. We don't know what those are, and certainly there's a long road before we get to that point. So again, I want to kind of come back to Generations Drive and just kind of go over the exhibit that was prepared for tonight's meeting. So after listening to the public comment, the statements from our team members and questions as well, it became apparent that there may be some design issues in terms of that access point, and that those design issues needed to be investigated. And so what the department requested is that first we do a larger scale image of that intersection so you can kind of see what it looks like. There is a single stop sign. That stop sign is, I'll use the other one there. That stop sign is placed on a light standard, and then the stop bar corresponds to the location of the light post and stop sign. So immediately when I saw this, it told me that the stop bar is probably too far into the community college site to be actually effective in its intended purpose. As you can see, if you stop there, you're a substantial distance away from the actual driving surface of Generations Drive. So part convenience, not putting another signpost up on Generations Drive and using an existing street light may have led to this, but I think that's an area that can be investigated. Oh. So again, street light with the stop sign on it, and then the stop bar in white, perpendicular to it. And here's the actual driving surface of Generations Drive. So you can see the distance, obviously, is pretty substantial. The other concern that was raised was just the amount of vegetation in this location, and then the directional sign here. When access points are developed and connect to public or private streets, we always look at something called the site distance triangle, and that's this area here. And within the site distance triangle, the rule is that you can't have any type of vegetation, structure, or other improvement over 36 inches. If so, you block the view from the driver seated in the car or vehicle. And so the good news here is that the sign is well out of the site distance triangle. It's here, represented by the shadow. And the vegetation, at least in this area, appears to be more turf than native grasses and other sustainable growth, and the same here. So from a image standpoint, the site distance, at least past the stop bar, and I want to emphasize that this image, you're past the stop bar, you're closer to the crosswalk. You can see the site distance isn't impaired by a directional sign or any type of vegetation, whether it be grasses, trees, or shrubs. Same holds true in the opposite direction, looking now south along Generations Drive. And as you can see, the site distance triangle has been maintained as turf or lawn. There is the street light, but again, as I say, when I look at this, the stop bar and the stop sign would probably be closer to the crosswalk, but obviously not within the crosswalk. So I think there is some alterations that might be able to be made. The other approach, and this is something Mr. Brown will be ready to discuss when he attends the February meeting of the team, is potentially making this a three-way stop. Now we just have the one stop sign here. Traffic flows freely on Generations Drive, both in a north and south direction. And so if there is a safety consideration, then placing a stop sign somewhere here and somewhere here may ultimately be part of the solution as well. So from the perspective of Generations Drive, there's a bit of good news. The sight distance triangles appear to be clear. There is a question regarding the stop sign location and stop bar. And then there is the opportunity, if we believe necessary, and again, Mr. Brown will comment on this in February, whether that needs to become an all-way stop, so to speak, versus just a single. Dr. Jones and Mr. Chair, with that, I've kind of covered the main components I wanted to discuss relative to Generations Drive.
Are there any questions or comments from team members? Elizabeth and then Terry?
Is this on? Can you hear it?
I believe so.
Okay. Thank you so much for addressing these issues. I do live to the south of this intersection in the Meadows, and this has been an issue ongoing for some time. I would like to mention, can you bring us a little closer to that intersection?
Certainly. I'm sorry.
Please?
I was trying to get
Right there. That's good. Every year that the barbecue bash has happened, they tend to really cut down all of the vegetation. So what you're viewing, if this was recently done, that vegetation really grew up closer than what it appears on this picture. It's not that way now because they just cut everything back in August.
Right.
For the barbecue bash. So if it's cut that way, I can see that that's more visual for the students either entering or exiting there. And a lot of them exit and go out Turkey Track. They'll go that direction, as well as making a left-hand turn, which is very hazardous when people are coming south. What about the sign? Was there anything that you said that you were going to move the sign? I heard the dimensions of the sign.
Right. I think in this particular instance, we'll use this image. As you can see, the stop bar and the stop sign are somewhat removed from the actual driving surface of Generations Drive. So use the curb line here, kind of indicate the driving surface, the crosswalk, and then the stop bar is even further back. Mm-hmm. In most instances, you would probably place the stop bar at the edge of the crosswalk and move the stop sign up to a corresponding location. So that's something I think the city can look at. Both Generations Drive is a city street, and certainly we can monitor and assist with the community college and get something changed if we need to.
And the sign, I'm at the community college sign.
Well,
because that's also it's more difficult for the students to see anyone coming south because that
right.
stop sign for them is set far back.
Right. And
which you said will be moved forward.
Well, that would be a recommendation I would make to our Department of Public Works is to alter the sign location and stop bar. The actual directional sign is well out of the sight distance triangle. So only if there's a long line of stacked vehicles would that impair any vision to the north. So at this stage, I would say unless I'm missing it, and I've been out there since our meeting in December, the sign itself doesn't pose a greater risk as the vegetation growing back in place and the current design of the stop bar and stop sign.
I would agree. It's only difficult for the students'
right.
vision to the north.
Right. And as I think they queue up toward the stop sign and stop bar, the sight distance improves dramatically for them.
Yes. Thank you.
Terry?
Yeah. That's usually the first step. Most people don't like placing stop signs unless they're absolutely necessary and the warrants exist. So what we've done in the past as a city, and this is more public works than planning, they'll put up warning signs first, just saying that, cross traffic does not yield or does not stop. And you hope that it's effective in telling the students, staff, and faculty, be cautious and pay attention. So I'll put that down as the list and let Mr. Brown comment then too.
Scott first, and then Ray.
Joe, a couple items. Are the trees in any way a possible hindrance or hazard for drivers in any direction? And then secondly, you didn't mention like an option for a rotary or something like that. Is there just not space there for that option?
I'll do the second first. When the community college and Wildwood Family YMCA developed separate times, we did not require the extent of right-of-way necessary to do the roundabout. If we were to consider that, we'd have to go back and request right-of-way from both entities. And then there's the cost as well. I do want to add a footnote. I mentioned the multiple family development that's looking at the property south of the YMCA building. One of the key discussion points at that meeting I mentioned with the developer was to do a traffic analysis of Turkey Track Road, Generations Drive, and New College Avenue. And at that stage, I think we'll look at projected traffic and we'll have a better understanding if a more formal traffic control is necessary there. So it's an excellent question. At this stage, I'm going to defer to the traffic study and maybe give you an answer a few months from now and see what we come up with. Mr. Lee was in attendance at that meeting, and if he'd like to comment.
I think that,
Michael?
yeah, I think that the most important part of that development
The development entity called the next day after the Monday night meeting with the group, which included the chair of the Planning and Zoning Commission, the 2 ward representatives from Ward 8, the mayor, and then the city council liaison on Planning and Zoning Commission, which is Tim Werther. So the 5 of them. And what we basically told them is you need to do an overall analysis of traffic volumes, levels of service. You need to explore and study the extension of Generations Drive to the north. They need to look at what level of improvements might be necessary to Turkey Track. And for the most part, we're hoping that and of course the intersection here, I forgot number 4, and look at that intersection as a key component, because if the apartment complex is approved and residents reside there, the logical location to get to and from their unit is on Generations Drive. So they'll have the same issue that the folks in Meadows of Wildwood are experiencing.
Ray?
Joe, so I have 2 questions. The first one is, while the studies are underway, what I hear is that there's an impairment of the visibility because of the encroachment of the taller grass and so on. Is there any opportunity to kind of exercise landscaping to cut that back in a more permanent way with lower ground cover and so on? My second question, the last time we met, I heard there were some perhaps behavioral issues on the part of students zooming out of there, and I'm not hearing any of that tonight. To what extent are we looking at that, tracking students being students, tracking that kind of behavior to increase their safety awareness?
Well, both points were discussed at the last meeting. And what the commitment of, I believe, the department was is once the team concludes its recommendations, which may include something relating to Generations Drive and this access point, the idea would be to sit down with the leadership at the community college and say, here's some things that we've developed based upon input from your neighbors. We would like to see you do an maybe an educational or outreach campaign with the students. And we can certainly help them develop a brochure. Did you know, those kind of things that, traffic doesn't stop on Generations Drive. You should before you get on it, that kind of thing. So from that perspective, I think I'd like to have in hand your all's report with solid recommendations to basically emphasize the importance. And first question just went out of my mind, and I haven't forgotten about street trees.
The first question was about just simple landscaping to push that taller grass back. It doesn't, I wouldn't think it necessarily requires a study. It just requires doing it.
Yes, and we can enforce that. It's within the context of the right-of-way, and certainly if we are told that it becomes problematic, we can just contact the community college.
And relative to my other question, in terms of behavioral changes, as somebody who lives near Clayton and Strecker, I can tell you that Clayton Road on the hill there used to be a lot speedier than it was after the Wildwood Police started posting there and handing out tickets. And it didn't take long before the word got out, slow it down. And I don't think we have such an issue there now.
I'll pass that on to Captain Mundell, our precinct captain. And Mr. Rysdale, as funny as it sounds, I started with this nice definition of a sight distance triangle and no vegetation being greater than 36 inches in height. There's a point, though, when trees mature enough that that window, so to speak, the bottom of the canopy is out of the view line, and the trunk itself isn't substantial enough in most instances, in this case, to create the obstruction. So it works out. It's when they're young trees and the canopy's low is that when we have to pay closer attention. Yes.
Deborah?
So, Joe, is there a possibility that we could have put a three-way stop sign there until we know what the study's going to be and the traffic study's done? And
Well, I talked with the gentleman, the developer, the next day, and it appears that he is proceeding forward. He asked for specific items for study. He wanted to make sure that he had the right list. I think we had consensus on that list, and he said he would get with the engineer, Mr. Stock, and get things started. So I think he's going to the next step. I haven't received anything in writing indicating such. Yeah, it was 111 or so, I believe.
so I know when we put the stop sign on Pond Grover Loop, it did slow people down because that's just a straightaway. So they may run it a little bit. They're running rolling stop, but I think at least that would get them to slow down.
Right. And I think at the next meeting in February, we'll talk about the stop bar, the stop sign location. We'll talk about sight distance again with Mr. Brown, and then certainly the three-way stop. But Mr. Hoffman's mentioned potentially doing caution signs in the community college side to see if that would be enough of a step to make things safer.
Yes, John. Elizabeth?
I would hope that a 3-stop sign area there would not be very advantageous. I think the remarks that you've made about notifying the college, moving that stop sign where students make a left or a right, north or south, out of the college area there, would be very beneficial. And right now, there's no difficulty with the trees. It's really the grasses
Right.
and where the stop sign for the students to stop is most imperative.
Any other questions or comments from the team?
So we have the exhibit. We'll have some additional information in February, but and at the conclusion of our February meeting, we'll do a summary, and then if the team members want, we can add additional information to the street network map in this regard.
Excuse me, I got one more comment.
Elizabeth and then Vince.
Yes. I stopped by the college today, and ask the gentleman that's in charge of enrollment and ask what the number of students were last semester that were enrolled. And I was told 1,181 students. So there's your cars right there. And then I stopped at the YMCA, which doesn't impact this intersection unless they're going to go around and skip the intersection there at 109 and go around Turkey Track to go south. And I was amazed at the number of members. Now, they're not all there at the same time. 9,000 members. Would you have guessed that? Not me. 9,000 members at the YMCA. So,
Actually, go.
half of them like you. But I had no idea. I knew that was a lot. And the parking lot occasionally is completely filled, depending on what events they have. But I thought that was important to share.
Just, Joe, I know, I'm trying to recall from the last meeting, we had talked about when we initiated the additional conversation regarding Generations Drive, it was kind of the continuation of it to Manchester Road, and we were going to reprioritize or re-examine that list. Will that be next month when, okay.
Yeah, the assumption was, since we're talking about Generations Drive and New College Avenue, that we get the final pieces of information and try to do it at a single time.
Okay.
Terry?
Elizabeth, that 9,000, is that individual or family or both? Because you could have, 9,000 basically people going there, but you could have a family that's got 3 or 4 teenage kids.
And if I may, Mr. Chair,
Yes.
Mr. Cohn, for perpetuity, you are now on record as saying you don't attend your fitness classes.
Other questions or comments from the team on this item? If not, item 6 on the agenda. Just regulating land and land use activities.
Thank you again, Dr. Jones and Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members of the team, as you know, we've spent several meetings going over the regulating plan. In fact, as you know, we did our tour in summer when it was a bit of a hot and humid night. We all survived it and returned for the better of it, I guess. And at our last meeting, Terry had prepared for your all's consideration this particular map. And it's different than the adopted version that is the first in the series of maps that have been provided to you. And if you take kind of a mental image of this map and then move to this one, you can see that we've added the 2 additional areas that will be neighborhood edge transition. Again, those being here on the southern boundary of town center in the Grover area, and then this area here that's defined by Route 100, Pond Road, and Manchester Road. We've also then identified those changes more so just by the corresponding colors, but also the pattern, the line pattern. So you can see the actual changes that have been made per your recommendations. The reserve, the 2 areas, the neighborhood general along Etherton Road at Crestview Drive and Main Street. So as you can see, the regulating plan has been altered over the course of time. The most recent change came at our meeting in December, and it relates to the 2 3-acre parcels of ground that now form the 6-acre tract of land that may someday be our village green or other public space in association with City Hall. As that discussion progressed in December, one of the items that came to light was, how does this all work relative to downtown district, cultural institutional overlay district, neighborhood general district, neighborhood edge, etc., etc. So, bear with me, my apologies, kept going. So tonight, the department has prepared an updated memorandum that first describes the 4 adopted changes. Then in Table 2 describes areas that have come under consideration, either from the public input session we held, where we invited owners in Town Center to come, meet the team, ask questions about their land use designations via the regulating plan, etc. And I think more importantly, there was a request that our economic development manager, Julian Jacquin, provide commentary on the impact of changing these lots, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, plus the lot here, 6, on either side of Crestview Drive, that being north and south sides. Mr. Jacquin has provided a memorandum in this regard, and that memorandum was part of your packet you received. Certainly, you all can read that memorandum, but to summarize, I think Mr. Jacquin's first initial impression was that 35 acres of downtown district, which was inclusive of this area, was a lot. But with the changes that have been made to date, these 10 properties and these 2 properties, Mr. Jacquin believes that now at about 15 acres, that's a good number and a workable number for a future development of downtown district type uses. And I believe if you've read the memorandum or the letter from Mr. Jacquin, I think you'll also see that reflected in there. What I like about the letter that he's prepared, after addressing the specific question that was raised by the team, he goes on to talk about traffic counts, things that commercial developers look at. And one of the things he told me was that despite the limited access here along Route 100, which is the northern boundary of these 5 tracts of land, it does have good visibility relative to at least 100, which is the most heavily traveled corridor in terms of vehicular trips in Wildwood. The other thing is he mentioned that most commercial entities like a minimum number of turns get to their project or their center. And so if you look at it from that perspective, you've got 1, 2, or 1, 2. And he said that's usually the optimum, 1 or 2. Certainly as you get more, 3 and 4, it becomes problematic. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, Atherton Road dead ends into 100. Is there any thought into making that an access onto 100?
Well, when the state improved Route 100 and, so to speak, made Manchester Road secondary to it, they purchased access rights as well. And so they intended it to be a limited access highway. And so from that perspective, the limited access issue would have to be tackled, and that would occur in Jefferson City at headquarters of Missouri Department of Transportation. And this would require a bridge, and that'd be an expensive project as well, because the embankments there are some of the tallest in town. So after talking about traffic counts, he basically gives a summary of what he's seen in terms of commercial demand or the request he consistently hears from residents and others about what they'd like to see in Wildwood in terms of town center land use. And so he goes into that, and all of those sound fattening: breweries, tap rooms, smoothie stores, ice cream shops, gourmet sandwich delis, things like that. And I guess the last one is recreation stores, so you can work it all off after you've done it. Mr. Cohn. So, and then he concludes after going through what potential commercial demand, what is appropriate and desired around the town center village green. And both the Department of Planning and our Economic Development Manager have identified that it's not going to be completely surrounded, so to speak, by commercial or downtown district. The village green purchase followed the development of City Hall, and certainly this is the area where we had a number of residents attend from near acres and spoke of, their concerns about changes. And so his conclusion is that having two sides plus City Hall is a pretty good start to a vibrant village green. And he references again that village greens at least seem to function best when there's services, restaurants, things like that in the vicinity, so people can grab a cup of coffee, go over to the green, read their paper on the iPad instead of paper, and things like that.
Just a comment. I know in reading Julian's packet yesterday, it seems as though he suggested perhaps, or the department has it, that we take a look at the role or the concept of drive-throughs in town center, because perhaps you can relay presently what is acceptable, what's not, and we can relay kind of what his idea of our evaluation should be.
And I was going to tackle that in our next agenda item if
Okay, I'm
you
sorry.
give me just a few minutes. No, it's a great lead-in. And then Ms. McCutcheon and I talked right before the meeting, then I'll conclude my long presentation here on this and then let you all speak. He gave the vacancy rates both for retail and office in town center. And as you can see, there are a lot of improvements between 2016 and now 2020 in terms of reducing vacancy rates, particularly in our retail centers.
So we're on 6A, questions about our comments about the presentation on 6A. Deborah?
Yes, I have a question. So we just finished up the economic development piece. Are we going to talk about Nears Acres? Because I'd like to do that.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm going to get back to those last three boxes in the final table. But I wanted to kind of talk a bit about Mr. Jacquin's analysis and information.
Chief?
Well, to that end, Julian had made a recommendation that the existing downtown classification for those remaining 6 lots on Crestview, in his mind, was acceptable designation. And I guess I would, and I don't know if you've got this planned for additional discussion or not, but does this body have any concern or thoughts regarding leaving that designation as downtown versus changing it in some other way, or are we comfortable with leaving it as downtown? Just so we can kind of...
Reactions to the point made by the chief? Yes. Naus?
I would really like to give the Village Green a chance. If we're looking at this as a 10-year review and what we're going to, possibly see in Wildwood in the next 10 years, the Village Green is going to be a central piece to that. Extension of Main Street, also a central piece for that. And, I would really like to see what becomes of the Wildwood downtown district once we get a Main Street through there, and there's plans already to improve Etherton Road, and so I think it's very appropriate to keep it as a commercial district, and even if we were to, like we did with the Prime, the city had authorized commercial space on the ground and residential in the airspace. So even if there is a need for more residential in some of these commercial zoned areas, I think that would be the avenue to go versus changing it to strictly residential. Just my comments. Thank you.
Others have a comment to the chief's point? Deborah?
Yeah. I don't object to Julian's plan. My question is, and it's come up before with the village green, where are we going to have parking? Because the parking garage certainly is not going to hold, hopefully, all the people that will be at the village green, especially if we have events there. So what are we going to do about parking?
Well, that's a very good question, as we always know that parking kind of sometimes is the tail that wags the dog instead of the other way around. So as part of the development of the concept plan for the Village Green, we've asked the consultant to look at shared parking opportunities with City Hall. As you know, we have a large parking area to the rear. Some of those parking spaces are dedicated for police purposes, so that's the first thing. We also have on-street parking both in front of City Hall and on the opposite side of Main Street. You've identified the parking garage, which in total has just about 300 spaces. So next to the community college and Lafayette High School, it's one of the larger parking facilities in the city of Wildwood. The question becomes, and this is a decision that a lot of other people will make, do we provide a certain level of parking as part of the Village Green?
Yes, Niles?
And also, if we're doing new urbanism right, we're going to encourage people to walk. You know, I live, it's a good walk to make it down to the city hall, but it's definitely doable. And Chief, we were supposed to have walked one of these meetings together, but we never quite made it. But maybe when it warms up, we'll just keep putting it off. But I think there are other ways that the city, when we have a city event, that we can encourage, walking, biking, other options, other modes of transportation, especially since it is in a centrally located area, versus like if you have a big event at Community Park. It's a fantastic place, but there's like really no parking at Community Park, and there's no residential around there that's going to be able to walk there much. So I think encouraging the walking, and then just you do your best with finding parking after that, on-street parking, shared parking, and the rest. So,
Vince?
Within our report or recommendations, can we include like pertinent negatives that we evaluated this and we agreed to leave it as downtown, so that the thought process and that we didn't do anything with it, so we did consciously make the decision to leave it as downtown?
Yes, I would think as a group, since we've discussed this at length, at least for 2 meetings now, if not more, we would at least give the benefit of the conversation, the rationales for no change, and maybe even do a minority report. Here is what some felt that were not consistent with the larger group. And that way, the users of the plan, whether it be property owners on Crestview Drive, developers, or the newly elected officials at some point in the future, will understand the context that the decision was.
Point about
Yes, Elizabeth?
So there's an existing vacant lot right here. It's a small lot, approximately about a half acre or less in size. There's this lot here that's defined by Main Street, Market Avenue, and Plaza Drive. That has the hill. And then there is this parcel here that is nothing but the side slope formed by the development of Plaza Drive. That actually has a plan to it. There was to be a lower storage that would elevate the building to grade at Plaza Drive. The parking garage lower deck was designed with a knockout wall, so you could access actually through a set of doors to that lower level. That would be below the grade of Plaza Drive, and then it was intended to have multiple stories thereafter. So this is all downtown district, so it could be anything as described by Councilmember Stevens, commercial on the first floors, and then residential above if we use the airspace.
What would be the number of parking area above ground?
Above ground, we're going to depend in these instances. This lot in concept had a small parking lot associated with it, as did this. The parcel here, that side slope area along the south side of Plaza Drive, that depended all on a lower level of parking, which was actually the below grade. So they were adding spaces to the parking garage, and then the parking garage and on-street parking.
And let me see if I can fully understand that. Is that west of the parking garage currently?
There's west, and the one I'm referencing now is north. So
West and north.
yeah. So, oops, sorry. The parking garage is this odd shape. Oh, pardon me. Yep, right here. Thank you, Terry. And this is the parcel I'm saying. That's just that side slope area, the west, and then the small one. This is the hotel as a point of reference, that kind of L-shaped lot.
Yes, Michael?
Joe, we're gonna have to do a transition from divided road park to divided road route. See that in the commercial district that we have here? For this west village green, because we don't have enough right of way from the first track.
One of the discussions that was held by City Council when we purchased these 6 acres is actually we're going to lop off a lot of that 6 acres for right-of-way purposes. So the council was aware of that and supported it. We are requiring, as part of Latitude North 38, a dedication of 40 feet of the existing private property for the purposes of Main Street, another major dedication. And so no. And given your expertise, the discussions we've had internally is we've got angled parking on Main Street through this section, maybe go to some parallel spaces through the downtown district, and then eliminate on-street parking as we go into the residential areas. Parallel spaces take less right-of-way width, as you know. Good point. Very good point. Thank you.
Other questions or comments on this?
So to conclude, at least on those 6 properties that are currently designated downtown district in the vicinity of the Village Green and Crestview Drive, our economic development manager, as well as the Department of Planning, concur with Councilmember Stevens. I think we need to retain as is. Let us get our feet on the ground about the Village Green, see what that does in terms of opening access and creating interest. And it is a 10-year window, and certainly if we miss it, we'll be back in 10 years, maybe not me, but, and hopefully all of you, to take another look at it.
You have other items as well, right, Joan?
Yes, and I wanted to, as Ms. McCutcheon mentioned, I wanted to go back to near acres, and that's basically these lots here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And as you know, we had a number of residents, almost all of them that reside on near acres, attend our public input session, and I kind of misinterpreted their concerns. They talked a lot about the future and not knowing what we're doing. And I think I took it as they might want to have a new land use designation associated with their property. I think actually after we talked as a group, the team and staff, the Department of Planning, I think they just want to know what's going to happen on that northern boundary. And I think with our discussion tonight, we can give them assurance for the next 10 years, here's what's going to happen.
Questions on that point or comments? Deborah?
Yeah, I got the impression that it wasn't just where downtown was going to be, but also the Reds' workplace, right? That they were also concerned with that because they were going to be surrounded then. And I think that was part of what they objected to, was being surrounded. Right. That's why I suggested last time maybe we should just extend it to Manchester Road as either neighborhood general transition or neighborhood general, so that they wouldn't be, I mean, they have 3-acre lots, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, and I think their real concern was being surrounded by commercial or, and I think that's what I got out of what they had to say.
And they did mention the workplace or the red colored parcels of ground as well. The only difference between this area and this area is that this is commercial. This is Miss Nettie White's store. This is an existing commercial business. This is. I think there's 2 residences here, and then we get down by Larry's Tavern. So the difference being is that there is established commercial there already, and so if we were to extend, let's say, a residential category, even the neighborhood general, we would probably create a number of nonconformities, so to speak. And the benefit to the design here is just more by nature than not. There's a creek that runs along this back area, and so all of the uses are fronted onto Manchester Road, and the remainder of the lots are generally not utilized for any commercial purposes. So it's a nice buffer already. And I believe one of the owners, from Near Acres complimented Miss Hood about how they keep up the property and don't create any problems for them.
Next to the residential, between the commercial, how much of a strip is that? Could you back that all the way up to Manchester Neighborhood General?
And again, is this the area that you're describing
Yes.
here? Yeah. That's the property that's owned by Mary Kay Corsair, and
Okay.
she's asked over the course of time to eliminate the workplace district. And we've been hesitant to do that because you end up having to eliminate it down here. I've identified it in the table as part of the memorandum. It's just that we do get a lot of comments about this area here that, it's really not a viable commercial area. It doesn't have the pattern that we see to the west, besides Larry's, of course. But again, it would be a major change, and it's not one necessarily the department would support at this time.
I just feel really bad for them being surrounded, because I think that's part of their concern, was being surrounded.
I concur, and like I say, I think we improved the circumstances here, and we got a clear message from the city council when they purchased this property, as well as our Parks Action Plan update team, committee, that we needed to design something that would not intrude into these residential lots. And I think that's the goal. And as I say, these have been here as long as the homes, and they seem to have created a nice balance.
Any other comments on this item? Back to you, Joe.
So from the department's perspective, there are 2 items that we've considered. That is the Crestview Drive area in the downtown district, and now the Manchester Road district and the workplace. And the department is recommending, as is our economic development manager, that no change be made at this time.
Comments or questions? Vince?
On the
It's not, we've talked about a neighborhood general there. They are coming to these development and zoning review this coming Tuesday. Once we have that information, we'll make it available to the town center update team. It's probably something we could revisit at a future meeting, but I don't have much information, so I don't want to necessarily make a recommendation for a change without having a better understanding of what it looks like,
Vince?
Just clarification, is that the same, a very similar type discussion as occurred with the other 5-acre?
Mm-hmm. Yes, he chairs the meeting.
Thank you.
Ed?
With regard to the workplace designation, fronting on Taylor and going to the south on Old Manchester at the roundabout, the interest that has been expressed has been for multiple family, and due to the grade change on Taylor to the property, it's questionable if retail can work there. But to keep it as workplace and eliminate the possibility of multiple family, I think is a problem.
Well, then the question may be that we could discuss under the next agenda item is accommodating potentially in the workplace district multiple family as a conditional use. That way its primary purpose still retains as some type of commercial, but we also acknowledge that if that isn't something that is of interest in the next 10 years, we have an additional option.
The commercial would work on the Old Manchester Road frontage. It's the Taylor Road side where there's the grade change. It could be a problem.
Vicki, did you?
I just was curious, are you looking for a motion about those commercial lots off of Crestview? Are you looking for a motion to approve that, or?
I would appreciate a motion just to say that we've discussed it and we want to retain it as is for the term.
Okay, then I'll make a motion regarding these 6 commercial lots facing Crestview, that we leave them as commercial.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
No, leave it as downtown, sorry. Thanks, Michael.
Discussion of the motion. Are you ready? Are you ready to vote? Yeah, there was a second. Okay. So we'll do a roll call vote. Terry?
Yes.
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 The motion passes.
With the permission of the chair, I would like to at least discuss this component about Manchester Road, the workplace district, and multiple family in probably a little bit more detail than I will tonight. So with your permission, I may have something on the agenda if that's acceptable.
For the next agenda?
That acceptable to the team? It is acceptable.
Can I just add a point of clarification? So the meeting that's occurring Tuesday evening, as it sits right now in the workplace setting, it's not acceptable utilization or classification for multifamily. So
Yes.
the developer would be seeking either a zoning change or exception through, okay.
And we're at that point, I think, because the department did not have any other recommendations relating to the regulating plan. And we've addressed the questions that were raised at the last 2 meetings by the team. So, but just here, this is the current land use, permitted land use activities chart. And as you can see, multiple family residential, the range of it is not anticipated to either the downtown or workplace districts. And so, as I say, at this stage, what will be heard on Tuesday night by the Development and Zoning Review Committee will include a regulating plan change. The department's cognizant of that, but as I mentioned, to make a recommendation to change it without knowing what it is would seem to be premature.
Niles?
And
Go-
but if you are keeping with like land use patterns, you potentially are not changing just one property going into Villages of Cherry Hills. You're looking at the one across the street, and then you could have a whole corner of, multifamily versus the current commercial corridor that we
Correct.
have.
Yes, it's like a short line of dominoes. If we do one, I think it's in the team's best interest to consider the ramifications on the remaining corners.
Well, I am in agreement with Michael Lee that I like the idea of being able to have one use on the ground and then the airspace above something else. And are you going to talk about the drive-through?
Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am.
Because that's what I'd like to talk about. So thanks.
So again, just to summarize, we've made one action tonight to retain the downtown district on Crestview Drive. There are no other actions anticipated relative to the regulating plan at this time. If there are some that I've missed, please advise.
Well,
Chief?
In terms of these, no, I think what I did is I've identified the two current proposals that we've discussed in the final table in the memorandum, this here and then the one over by the Wildwood Family YMCA. Oh, yes, that's, I was speaking to the regulating plan being concluded. Now we'll move to the chart.
Deborah?
So, Joe, right now, the Crestview Drive has residents on it.
Correct.
So, how does that?
Like in the case of latitude North 38, there's a residence here. I believe there's one here. If the development is eventually approved by City Council, the residences will be removed and 12 will be constructed in their place. This property, I believe, is back on the market. And as Mr. Schmidt, who's in attendance tonight, spoke at one of our meetings, many of these properties, not all, but a few, are rentals along here. The longtime owners have either moved or passed away, and they've been purchased, and as I say, they're rental properties now. So it's unfortunate we all age and some people move to other locations. But having rental properties, at least it makes it a little easier. And as we've always told people, even from day one with Town Center, we're not going to force you out. That's not the intent of the plan. The intent of the plan was to add value to your property at some point in the future.
Any other comments on item 6A of the agenda? Michael?
I think it's a good point, because if you look at the current table, you'll see that there's a few that are different, but not many. The difference is more so in the downtown district, the footprint of the buildings can be up to 40,000 square feet, and they can be multiple stories. So the idea was you could end up with an 80,000 or 120,000 square foot building in the downtown district. The difference is in the workplace district, the footprint is limited to 10,000 square feet. So it's less intense, less expansive, reduced parking. So your charge is to start that discussion. Do you think one category is sufficient for commercial use? Is it all downtown? Is it all workplace? Do we merge? So the department wasn't recommending that, but certainly it could be considered. It's not anything off the table. Yes.
Considering, because I think you limit that site right there off of Taylor Road. There's no parking there. You have to be developed with parking on site.
Yes, sir.
You're gonna have a small little building against your large building. Which, you know, we're working on transition.
And as I recall, it's been now almost 20 plus years. The downtown district was always intended to be more intensive in use, larger footprint of buildings, more diversity of commercial uses. But as we transition to the historic Route 66 corridor, which is bounded by new residential in many instances, the idea was to transition to a less intense commercial pattern, smaller square footages in terms of footprints, and less range of uses. And so there was a logic to the transition. Does the logic remain after 20 plus years? That's a question that the team needs to explore if they'd like.
Don't see a lot. There's a lot of big remodeling.
Well, it's a bit of a when Andres Dewani was in town and talking to the residents and property owners and others during the charrette, and then in his presentation that followed a couple of months later, he was using a Palm Pilot, and that seemed like the technology of the future. It wasn't connected to the internet. No one had any idea what the internet would do to the economy in terms of retail sales and all the things that would happen. So, as I say, in 20 plus years, the whole retail environment, as Mr. Cohn can certainly comment on, has been turned upside down. And so there have been times that I look at our town center map and say, if we filled that, it'd be a miracle, because brick and mortar doesn't seem to have the interest that it once did. But I don't have a crystal ball. Mr. Cohn. Right.
I think better off.
Peggy? Ed then first?
Yeah, Michael Lee, are you advocating on the frontage of Taylor Road in Old Manchester, roughly a 4.5 acre tract, that it would be like commercial type use on the lower level and then possible residential going up?
If we would change the zoning to downtown, that would be acceptable for that condition. If we leave it workplace, then we have to deal with the small strip center activity, and that's not what we want.
Not only that, it's not what the interest is. Everybody we've talked to about that remaining tract of land is multiple family.
If we would make a recommendation, the easiest way to do this, rather change it downtown where it's a conditional use.
Vicky?
Okay, so I see what you're saying about that tract of land. Thank you, Joe. Thanks, Joe. My finger was pointing. But if you go directly across Taylor Road, now that's no longer downtown. Now that's something else. Right. Oh.
They're going to be limited to what self-park and a business.
Okay, so you're talking about changing one thing to downtown and then doing, being able to change the zoning of the airspace.
The only difference is workplace size of the lot,
Right.
ability to multifamily on the top, commercial. That's with
Well, actually, in the
There-
prime case, we designated the airspace neighborhood general
Right.
to accommodate the residential component. I would argue that we could certainly change these to downtown, increase the range of potential commercial uses, and then make a recommendation that airspace could be utilized for residential purposes. I mean, there's a number of options.
I would, and perhaps Councilman Stevens can provide some sentiment. I don't think, my dealings in the community in that immediate area is that there isn't the buy-in for multifamily there. I know from a town center concept and the mixed uses that is, but with the traditional residential subdivision development that's immediately beyond the town center border there, I would be surprised if and I'll defer to the councilman for that area, if there's the stomach, if you will, for multifamily at that corner.
Niles?
Anybody that I've brought it up to said no thanks. That's every bit of feedback that I've got would be no. We already have multifamily just inside of Villages of Cherry Hills. You know, we have a really nice condo, area, and we have villas, and we have, and it transitions into, traditional subdivision, and we even back into the subdivision into Lancaster Estates. It gets into bigger lots as well. And at the very back end, where I live in Willow Glen, it transitions into the non-urban area as well. There's 27 acres that's for sale back there. So I think the transition of having, light commercial into dense residential, less dense, that's everything that I've heard. People like that, and they're acceptable with that.
So what I'm hearing a lot is that we need apartments for young families who may have lived here with their parents, and then they want to be able to stay in Wildwood when they can't afford to go build a house. Then they would need some type of apartment in order to stay in Wildwood. So I think that might be a good spot for apartments. I think we need apartments somewhere in Wildwood.
Niles?
Neighborhood General does allow for multifamily, and we just changed quite a few commercially zoned that were strictly commercial to Neighborhood General, which does allow for the multifamily, and also in the cultural overlay district that was a acceptable land use as well for multifamily. So there could be multifamily right there. There could even be multifamily on the Pruitt property down there on the end as well. So I think there's opportunities for multifamily already, and we don't need to just strip away all of the commercial, because Night-Year Acres could just, all 7 of those people could just decide tomorrow that they want to sell, and they sell out to high dense residential in there. The properties on Lindy Lane are also some older properties that could start to turn over. There's obviously been a lot of interest in building in Wildwood already with Main Street Crossing, Brightleaf, the multifamily proposals that are coming up, the Ackerley Place Reserve proposals that are coming up. We've increased the size of town center to allow for more residential development with the net. So if developers want to develop, there's plenty of opportunities, and I don't think that we need to throw out all of the commercial and just open it up to all residential just because that's what's hot right now.
Well, it's not just because right now. I think it's something that's needed, and that's, again, I mean, you have housing, and that's what's supposed to happen in town center, is that you be able to walk from where you live into the other areas with things around it that you're going to want if you're an apartment, like restaurants and shops and those kinds of things. So,
Michael.
I think it's bigger.
So with my concept of throw out the
And
Niles?
just to clarify, you're suggesting just the parcel to the north, so just on the,
Northwest corner.
just that, you're suggesting to downtown, not the entire corner.
No, just that track, because it's a large enough track to support that type of activity without an assemblage of another lot.
Gotcha.
And by doing that, it would essentially just open it up to the multifamily.
No, that would be a concept that would come to Joe, and it would be scrutinized by P&Z and so on.
Somewhere the
Council.
prime,
Exactly,
something
do
like
that
the
same
prime.
process. But you could put a library in there when you
Mhm.
wanted to come in, and it would be a authorized use. Right now it is.
Okay. Joe, we're on 6B, sort of, right?
Sort of. But I don't want to leave the discussion. Is there direction you'd like the department to take, to do further study, to look at potential options? Terry, our mapping expert, can go in and make some changes to the colors so you could see what it might look like, etc. I just don't, if there's no action, fine, but if there is something you'd like us to explore, we'd be glad to do it for the team.
No, but Michael went toward a motion, but never made one. Do you want to?
I'll make a motion that we change, recommend change.
I'll second.
Discussion? Vicki?
I just have one question that if we change it to downtown, can they put a gas station there?
They are identified on the list of activities that could be permitted, but they would go through a rigorous review to see if they are appropriate.
In other words, it has.
What would the department's thoughts be regarding that change?
I'd like to think about it a bit myself. But it impacts the intersection. And so, as I say, I don't want to dissuade the motion. There's been a motion, it's formally been seconded, so there'll be a vote. And I'll wait for the vote.
Deborah?
So couldn't you change what is acceptable and change it to conditional use if you don't want a filling station there, if you don't want drive-through restaurants? Couldn't you change that on here to change it to a conditional use instead of permitted?
Certainly, that's within the purview of the team and its recommendation process. So once we get to the table, if there's something there that, from your all's perspective, is, wow, that's just too intensive a use just to be considered permitted, let's make it conditional. So if it is proposed, it goes through that second tier of rigorous review and consideration. So yes, ma'am.
Vince?
So are we looking at the new downtown or the existing downtown? Because we haven't approved the new, so the new downtown includes conditional for multifamily, whereas it's not, no options in the existing downtown.
That's it.
Vince, let me give Vince a question. reply and then go to Vicky.
Well, what about, if you look on the first page, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 items in the cultural institutional region that are new.
No, if we don't adopt the new, is what I'm trying to
Oh.
say. So if we adopt the new, that's where it opens up, and that's where I started the conversation with the new.
And I guess my point would be, do we need to first adopt the land use classifications before we decide to put parcels within that?
But this is all just a recommendation. So
Right.
our
But
recommendation.
but your
would go-
recommendation is on a parcel of land, not on the land use classifications.
No, it's okay. My recommendation would be based upon adopting the new downtown land.
And I guess what I'm saying is that, should that be the first activity?
Know what the land is going to be part of the land is. What do you call it?
The motion is to change something into a classification we don't have.
May I suggest to the team and to the maker of the motion that we just put if the classification is changed, then,
I'll accept it.
is that acceptable to the
It
second?
doesn't matter if we don't accept it, then I would withdraw. The activity that it allows changes the film. We don't want that.
Yeah, but you could change it conditional or.
But then we would have, under our new designation, filling station, permitted.
When we change things into the net, correct?
Yes, we did.
And I guess procedurally, it seems, in my perception, that it makes more sense. Well, not that it doesn't make sense, but that first the classification should be changed, then we'd apply that where we.
Split the,
Procedurally, then, I would recommend, Vince, if that's what your view is, you propose the motion get tabled until the new classification is or not is not adopted.
I would.
no, yes,
Yes.
Yes.
yes, I'll table it for now.
Yes.
No, I'd rather make a decision and go forward. So.
Yes.
The motion passes. The motion is tabled.
With the permission of the chair and our moderator, facilitator, I'll jump to the next agenda item.
Without objection?
So the last item that relates to land use that we've now discussed in part is we have land use categories. We've talked about the downtown, the workplace, the neighborhood, general neighborhood edge, cultural institutional overlay district, the new neighborhood edge transition, etc. And what we did with the original town center plan is after the categories had been established, we went through a process of looking at what would be appropriate uses that could be considered in those land use categories. And so the table that's on your monitors and projected on the wall behind the dais is the current set of activities. And so the abbreviations are D for downtown, W for workplace, etc. P means permitted, C means conditional. And what that really means is that a permitted use gets one level of review. It's not automatic. C means you get 2 levels of review, and it's a more rigorous process. And then there's some footnotes associated with some of them relating to the size of footprints in the workplace and commercial districts, or in this case, the downtown district. So that's what's there now. We kind of updated it so it looks a little more 2020 versus 2010.
Just a quick clarification. Where there's nothing, either conditional or permitted, what is, that doesn't,
It means
had folks come to you and say, we'd like an audience either with yourselves or some.
well, certainly there's, as I say, there's people that come and it's like this Tuesday night meeting. It's designated workplace. They want to do a neighborhood general use. So, yes, we have that happen all the time. What we say is you need a regulating plan change. So by comparing their request to the table, we know the next step. Before a zoning can be considered, a change in zoning, we need to look at a regulating plan change as well.
So even though it's not permitted or conditioned, in theory, anything could be proposed. Is there anything that you say absolutely no, I'm not sending it to P&Z, or just no?
The beauty of any zoning process, we provide you the mechanism for a complete failure. Exactly. I can say it till I'm blue in the face, but some pursue it, and inevitably the outcome isn't always as favorable as they like.
And there is a formal, I agree with your decision, and then you say, well, then you have to do X, Y, Z.
Then I pass them on to Mr. Lee and the
Okay,
Planning
so
and
that's-
Zoning Commission.
Thing, and then we control. Through the process.
Not to be a comedian, but we allow anybody to propose what they'd like, knowing that they've been advised that it's an uphill or it's allowed or not allowed. So we give them all the information and they can still make a decision regardless of that information.
Hello, Joe.
Ms. Elfrey, how are you?
Okay, so we're going to talk about drive-through now. Can we do that?
Well, yes.
Okay, because I've been going over this list about the downtown, new downtown, workplace, new workplace. And I'm going through this list item by item. There's a couple things that the proposed list of land use activities for 2020 have been blacked out, such as bakeries, shops for artists, shops and retail purposes, and open air markets. Is there a reason those are blacked out?
Yes, because I think they're collectively covered by stores and shops for retail purposes.
So they're not forbidden, they're just, you feel like they've been kind of eaten up by another category.
It's the differentiation is so marginal or so, it just doesn't make sense. It just clutters the chart
And that's fine, I just wanted to make sure that we were clear on that. Okay. The other thing that I want to talk to you about was drive-throughs. Since I have been on planning and zoning, it seems to be a hot button item. I personally, and I don't live in downtown district, so, you know, let's throw that out there right now. I personally hear from a lot of people that say they would come this way more if there were drive-throughs. Now, whether or not that's true, I don't know, but I will also say I think that drive-throughs can take a different look than just a McDonald's drive-through. I think they can tend to be nicer. And it seems that a lot of the brick and mortar industry has some sort of drive-through. Even Walmart and Target have a pickup place to pick up their stuff. So, I mean, I think it's worth looking at having a drive-through in this workplace district, especially on Manchester Road, where you've got businesses on both sides of the street. That's my 2 cents.
Comment on the drive-through matter, Vince? And then Niles?
If I recall, didn't Julian say something about drive-throughs as well? I mean, something to the effect that drive-throughs aren't, that's the classic McDonald's drive-through. There's different components. And I believe that he suggested or recommended that we expand or incorporate more opportunities for drive-throughs, correct?
Yes. Approximately a year and a half or 2 years ago, the Department of Planning brought to the Planning and Zoning Commission a proposal to amend the land use activity table or chart to allow drive-through facilities with fast food restaurants and other similar activities in the workplace district, but limiting it to Route 109 or Route 100. The idea being, again, that those two corridors have the traffic volumes, those two corridors have the extent of improvements, and those two corridors are primarily downtown and workplace district. The interest in commercial designated or downtown or workplace designated properties on Route 109 has not been for sit-down restaurants. It's been for bank facilities with drive-through. It's been for fast food restaurants with drive-through facilities. And so from that perspective, it's pretty clear that if we're going to see commercial development along the Route 109 corridor, a drive-through needs to be a component of that consideration. I too concur that drive-through facilities can be sited, they can be screened, they can be designed so as they're not the intrusions that a lot of people associate with them from past activities. So I haven't gone as far as saying on Manchester Road, Old Manchester Road, but I certainly feel it's reasonable to consider an expansion on Route 109 and Route 100 where the workplace district exists.
Niles?
I think that the group that came up with this list to have, the drive-through facilities, fast food in particular, as downtown versus workplace were very shrewd, because I work in Brentwood and I travel down Manchester Road the whole way out to Wildwood a number of days, and from Brentwood all the way down to Ellisville, it's drive-through, 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 and you get to Wildwood and it stops. And that's like the character of Wildwood. We are a little bit different. We don't have, all the same development as you see all down Manchester Road. And I think that distinction between the workplace and downtown district does really add to what Wildwood is about and the character for Wildwood. And also, we have a current drive-through facility that is completely unused right now. I know that there's drive-through facilities that are in Ellisville that are in a very high, dense, commercial zone with lots of businesses, lots of houses around them that can't survive just for employee reasons. Steak and Shake is, struggling. The Taco Bell that's in Ellisville is struggling for employees. And so I just don't see the need to add more drive-throughs, particularly fast food drive-throughs in Wildwood, when we have one already that can't get filled. So it's just my opinion.
Vicki?
So respectfully, I think that it's not just fast food places that has drive-throughs. Those are the ones that I use. But I think that other businesses can provide the use or can utilize a drive-through. The Patterson Farms building over where they were in that building, so their parking lot, and just to go into their store, you had to drive around the back of the store, come around the front, if that were a drive-through, nobody would know if you were driving down Manchester Road. I think that to tie our hands and say we're not going to allow them, it's not, I just don't know that that's the way to go right now. I think that we should open it up and rely on planning and zoning in the city to say, you know, you can't have a drive-through that, with big neon lights that jumps onto Manchester Road. I think it can be tastefully done and zoned, if zoned properly. Thank you.
Niles?
I would go ahead and make the motion to keep the workplace land use classifications to not include restaurants with drive-through facilities as either just not permitted, not conditional or permitted. Yeah, keep the status quo. So,
Well, technically, you don't need a motion to keep the status quo.
well, just because if we were to approve the entire list of new, you know, I'm just motion to remove it from the new workplace, you know, classification list here. Can I do that?
But then we're limiting. Because then we're total, any retail operation without food, pharmacies, banks, dry cleaning.
No, just for this one line item. So the line item is restaurants, including fast food with drive-through facilities. Currently, it's not
Okay.
permitted. The new list shows conditional. I would recommend to remove conditional from the new list for that line item.
And is that the only classification where drive-through would be permitted at all? At the workplace? Downtown?
Downtown. And see, I
Okay.
put that, put conditional under downtown.
There is a motion's been made to remove conditional for the restaurants, including fast food, but without drive-through facilities. Is there a second to that motion? Second. Discussion of the motion. Hearing none, there's ready for a vote. Terry, will you want roll call vote?
No.
Yes, ma'am.
No.
Member Humphrey?
No.
Member Lee?
I'll say no.
Member Hoffman?
Yes.
No.
Member Stevens?
Yes.
Motion passes. Back to you, Joe.
Thank you, Dr. Jones.
So essentially, just that piece will come off the proposed new,
Correct.
Okay.
Wait, so it's the new work,
yeah, the new workplace.
but it's
Yes.
being permitted in downtown.
Yes, and that's consistent with the existing. So the fast food restaurants with including fast food with drive-throughs is already permitted in the downtown. The new downtown would retain it, and we would eliminate this right there. And so, just to give you a story, as you know, St. Louis Bread Company had been at Wildwood Crossings, where the Schnucks is located, for many, many years. They were ready to leave Wildwood if a drive-through facility was not available. We were able to direct them to the downtown district at Deerberg's Town Center and retain a bread company. So suffice to say that although it's fast casual, the overwhelming response I get from residents is don't let bread company leave. And so I think in the downtown district, even if it is, and then at the end under recommendation by the team conditional, we need to allow at least some fast food with drive-through facilities. Because without it, we would have lost the bread company. Well, there was not, because the C8 Plan Commercial District Ordinance that governs the Dearborg's Town Center allowed one fast food restaurant on the site. So it was consistent with the governing ordinance that had been in place since 1999, approximately.
Other items dealing with the list? Yes, Ed, and then
You
Elizabeth.
talked, on the Deerbrook site, you just said one fast food was allowed?
That's my recollection, but,
All right, isn't Subway fast food?
well, they don't have a drive.
Oh, okay. All right.
Pardon me, I should have differentiated with a drive-through facility. Yeah, but yes, Subway is considered a fast food restaurant.
Elizabeth?
We certainly can. Now, if you'd like.
I noticed that a couple of items. I'd like to bring attention we don't have to see it. Maybe being through it out of that parcel of land only usable about 8 to 10 acres because it slopes down very steeply. You may give a better synopsis of where we've been at, which is south of the property, almost by the developers. Those apartments. Love. I'll fill in.
Sure. For those that are more recent residents of Wildwood, in 1995, when the city incorporated, Vernon Pruitt ran an illegal junkyard on this 15 acres. Prior to the incorporation, St. Louis County was able to gain a circuit court ruling against Mr. Pruitt, and the circuit court required him to close it. So by the time of the incorporation, the facility was no longer accepting beat-up cars and parts and etc. It took a while to get it all cleaned up, but it has been cleaned. And more recently, McBride and Son Homes looked at that particular parcel of ground and was proposing single-family detached dwellings on individual lots. That did not get a favorable review by the city, but I mention it because they did do a phase 1 and phase 2 environmental assessment, meaning they did the book work in phase 1 and they actually did almost 50 some odd test holes out there to see what was left after the illegal junkyard. Nothing toxic, nothing hazardous, but just a lot of junk still buried down there below the surface. So fast forward to now, knowing that the property was on the market, some of the residents, including Miss Broyles, came to the city and talked to us about the potential of purchasing that ground and using it for a trailhead that would allow access from this area of town center south into Rockwoods Reservation and then ultimately down to the Hamilton Car Greenway. There were some concepts that had been developed by residents in Meadows of Wildwood for us to use. We talked with officials at the Missouri Department of Conservation, which manages Rockwoods Reservation, and they actually agreed to allow us to build a natural surface single-track trail from here down into the wildlife refuge. Negotiations relative to the purchase of this property didn't go as well as hoped, and so it's still kind of in limbo. There's no one looking at the property other than the city, as far as I know. But again, the thought is that this could be a trailhead and then retained as just open space.
Go ahead, Elizabeth.
They left in May 2015. Planning and zoning unanimously voted no. And we have a real unique opportunity to keep some green sides to bring to the and trail would be a trail all the way down the east side of the YMCA, all the way down to Turkey, into that east property. And we did some of the Niles. We took the field trip down there and walked down to Christie Road. It's a beautiful piece of property. Flat. It's accessible, but it's not compromised piece of property built because of the access. You can imagine it's right there by Turkey Track out and at Generations Drive. Talking about it, 35. So the planning and park department and the committee I was on, all of them, we made recommendations to save this. Wildwood take a close look. Joe knows more about she. But there are planned ideas. Walk, bike into that trail, not bike down into rock. There's a ridge line there. You walk that ridge line and you traverse back down on the western side. And there's the Lime Hill ruins there. And eventually, the way the city put the trail for Department of Conservation, it would actually connect with current Lime Hill. But I know not. I saw his face. You want to share?
With the permission of Ed and Vicky,
wait a minute.
canals.
Well, no, I just had a question. Are you just concerned because they're taking out the scenic area and wildlife
Scenic
refuge?
area and wildlife refuge.
But they're replacing that. Basically, it's covered under park and open spaces and private areas rather instead.
I would like to see the scenic area and wildlife refuge to remain in there for this piece of property, because that's what it would be.
Versus being
park.
allowed for
It
a
will not
park
be a
or
park.
something.
It would
Okay,
not
I was
be a
just
park.
thank you for your clarification.
So you wish to make a motion, Elizabeth? Make a motion,
I want to
Elizabeth.
hear what Vicky has to say first.
Well, Ed is first and then Vicky. Ed?
when McBride did their Phase 2 borings on the Pruitt property, they didn't do any on the far southern end. And I remember in the 70s and 80s, when I would drive up 109, I would see car bodies sticking out of the ground. So they're buried in there deep. So without really going into detail on it, we need to have a further Phase 2 study done, because there's a bunch of stuff hidden in there.
Nikki?
My question was the same as that.
Oh.
Thank you.
And a comment about that. A natural trail, we would not be digging up that property. It would be a natural, single trail, track trail, into that property and then on down into Rockwood Reservation. So there wouldn't be disturbing, and we'd hope to make it an area where people could come. There would be a possible, not a pavilion, but a,
What do you want to do with the rest of the agenda?
I read postponed it, yeah.
I'll ask you.
I can do it. You want me to make a motion?
If you'd like,
I would like to make a motion that we add scenic area and wildlife refuge into cultural institutional.
sir. Discussion of the motion. Deborah? And
Yeah.
then Michael?
Joe, if they were to put a development in there, we could require them to put a trail in.
Yes, ma'am.
Alright. Under cultural institutional, we have park and open space, public and private areas. So why don't we just, if you really want scenic, instead of open, why don't we just add the word there? We're recommending that it's under the new categories, permitted in every zoning. I don't see
I
the
understand.
difference. Legally, I don't understand why, somebody who would present it would say, well, what's the
Do you want to comment on that?
Because this is the only place now. If you look at cultural institutional, where else is there another place?
okay, what we're recommending?
Well,
It's an open space.
it's an open space. You're right. But then I would say take park out of it, because we've got plenty of parks in Ward 1.
Joe, do you want to comment just from a technical standpoint on the?
Well, the department chose to proceed in this fashion because it was trying to consolidate some of the like uses. So let's say that in a scenario, the city of Wildwood is successful in purchasing the Pruitt property, the 15 acres. It's currently zoned non-urban resident district. We would change the non-urban to park and scenic district, and the list of permitted uses in the park and scenic district, the zoning category, not the land use, but the zoning, includes wildlife refuge, scenic districts, parks, open spaces. So I guess I know a little bit more about it than I probably explained, but again, I was just trying to consolidate the table, because in the 20 plus years of town center discussions, I've never had an individual, an organization, or entity come and say, I want to use the wildlife refuge on my property. Well, I see the wildlife refuge being much more restrictive in terms of a park, because again, you're purchasing the property to preserve the wildlife, which means you limit the activity substantially in it. And from a perspective of the department and representing the city, if the city purchases 15 acres, we don't necessarily want to tie the hands of the city at this stage until they have an opportunity to hear from all of the public, not just the residents and meadows of Wildwood.
I just don't understand the need to have, if you want to add the word scenic, put it in that. So,
Sure. Sure. And I don't want to table this.
Right, exactly.
I don't want this to go to a table.
And you don't want it to lose either.
No. I'm just looking at town center as a whole. And we're talking about putting up buildings and more traffic and lots of infrastructure needed. This is going to be a natural piece that can be used by all of Wildwood. So
Are you withdrawing the motion then?
I'll withdraw the motion and restate it. Can I do that?
Oh, you need the permission of your second to withdraw? Permission granted? Back to your restatement?
Okay. Can we include scenic area in that? I know
Yes,
it's too
ma'am.
long. I would like to take the word park out of it because I know that we have so many parks. This is not a park. This is a refuge, and it's not just for animals, it's for two-legged animals as well.
It could be. Or it could be, you guys have designated.
It's a trailhead.
Can I jump into this?
Yes,
Michael?
absolutely.
So, the area we're talking about is the blue area on the map. We're not gonna, that makes perfect sense because you're not gonna do another park in the blue area.
No.
So.
Can we
this
remove the word
zoning
park?
is only for the blue area, so you can get rid of the word park and you don't impact.
Yeah, but we eliminated the other classification.
It's in the cultural and institutional zone.
But
It's
the
in all
general
zones.
category, if we eliminate the word park from the general description, the category, we would eliminate it in all the land use.
In all the areas?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, we don't want to do that.
So then take the P out of the.
What?
No, we want to.
I understand what you're trying to do. but
I know you
think
do.
that
Before the half forest,
You
so
were-
we know what that's going to be for. We don't own that. City doesn't own that.
You have to pay for it.
Again, the intent of the department wasn't to eliminate the opportunity for scenic areas or wildlife refuges. Under the description of park and open space, and now could include scenic areas, it would be inclusive because, again, we would rezone the property if owned by the city to park and scenic district. And as the list of permitted uses, it includes scenic areas and wildlife refuges.
We did, just administratively. Would it be acceptable to add administratively scenic to that classification for you? Scenic open spaces?
Well, the administration has to agree to do that. Joe?
Certainly but I'm here to,
Elizabeth, is that strong enough, or you want a motion?
Scenic open spaces. And
Park,
you take the
scenic,
park
and
out.
open
No,
spaces.
parks would still be there.
You're leaving park.
So to clarify, that piece of track is in the blue zoning. We're not gonna do another park in that blue zoning area, so that doesn't even apply.
Okay, so we
If
can
you
remove
leave
park?
in there, then park will carry through all the zoning.
I see. So everything is interconnected to
Correct.
all the other zonings. Okay, that I wasn't quite clear. Okay, so my new motion
Right, is?
I will try to state it as well as I can, is park and open spaces, public and private scenic areas.
Discussion.
You want me to say it again, Terry?
well,
you
we
right?
got it,
Oh, you got it? Okay.
I'm sorry, but
Mr. Steve.
there's nobody that's gonna buy property in the town center and turn it into a park for private use. The only one that's gonna do it is the city.
That's right.
So it doesn't make any difference what the verbiage is on this.
But if the word park affects all the other zones, and I can't visualize that, what that all means. But I'm okay with how I stated it. If it's okay with Mr. Vunich.
Well, we could certainly say just park and open spaces and scenic areas.
That's the same sense of the resolution as I would interpret it.
Yes, and it's going to be public and private.
Yeah,
Further discussion?
per Mr. Hoffman, if some private owner wants to make a park for themselves, go for it.
Any further discussion?
Trailer park.
Not a trailer park.
Is
Getting
that part
the-
of the motion?
We're starting to get to the silly stage here,
Okay, we're
okay.
getting silly now, okay. He's got his
Okay.
gavel out, okay.
Are you ready to vote?
So
will
you
you-
need it repeated again, gentlemen, ladies?
You're adding and scenic area to the description of that category.
And leaving out public and private.
No?
I thought we said that.
That was my recommendation,
Yes.
but,
You can leave it in, they're not gonna do it.
right.
It doesn't matter because you only have public or private.
Right.
If you leave it out, it's
Redundant.
understood.
Yeah.
So public, park and open spaces
And scenic area.
and scenic areas.
Are you ready to vote? Terry, will you call the roll?
Member Edford? Member Brewer? Yes. Member Weiss? Member Briscoe? Member Broyle?
Yes.
Chair Loyal?
Yes.
Member Cohen?
Yes.
Member Helfrey?
Yes.
Member Lee?
Yes.
Member Hoffman?
Yeah.
Councilmember
What was that?
Councilmember McCutcheon?
Yes.
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Unanimous, thank you.
The motion passes. Let me call the group's team's attention to the fact you passed your designated adjournment time. Chair, how do you wish to
I
proceed?
would suggest that we table the balance of the agenda until our next meeting. I would, however, provide an opportunity if there's any public comments that remain.
Are there any public comments?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I just want to be very clear that when, the next time we meet, we will finish going over the land use code. Yes, we'll complete that. We didn't talk about the second one. Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure we're clear. Thank you.
Are there any public comments?
Yes. Mr. Tony Bosworth, please.
Thank you. My name is Tony Bosworth, 2442 Etherton Road, 63040, here in Ward 8, just right up the street. I'm glad it stays open for a little while with these discussions on the land uses. My primary business, specifically inside residential, is commercial real estate. And I have been working on Highway 109 for 13 years, actually 14 years now. On the Schneider parcel that is now Main Street Crossing, to do Shop and Save, Warenberg Theater, and J.C. Penney, which got blown away. Everybody knows what happened on the other side with Schnucks, etc. And what always comes up in this town specifically is drive-throughs. And again, I've worked up and down 109, up and down 100. I have made Wildwood my career. I generally agree with what happens with the city and how it grows. And we have discussed drive-throughs in city council. It's gotten shot down. It's just been discussed in P&Z. It's gotten shot down. It got referred back to this committee in 98. It got back in 2016 or 2010, 2016. Now again for this Town Center Update Committee to not have drive-throughs on 109. It's ridiculous. It's a fringe use. It is on the main streets. Not all Taco Bells and not all McDonald's are on mile after mile from Brentwood to Wildwood. That's a load of crap. And the people that are on this board that have knowledge know that, and other people are making votes because the single ward council person is here for that district makes that suggestion, and they're not basing it on the knowledge of the people on this board or the public, which there isn't anybody here. And I'm going to pull a bunch of people in here for the next meeting regarding this because it's ridiculous. Drive-throughs on that property, which I am responsible for, which is south of the BP station, on 109 on the east side of the street. You've seen my signs up there, again, for 13 to 15 years now, and a big part of my demand has been uses that involve a drive-through. There are fast food casual. There are different categories within fast food. As some of you heard, I don't remember if it came up because I lost my mind and walked out of here and calmed down for a minute, but I had Culver's in my hand, ready to go to this site in February of 2018, and it got blown away. That's not McDonald's, it's not Taco Bell, and they draw a different kind of employee. The reason that Steak and Shake went to Hell in a Handbasket, for which I own 2 of them in Ohio, they have had trouble finding employees because it's the crappiest restaurant to work at, and that's why they have trouble finding employees. Taco Bell isn't far above that, and they pay less. Those are the people that are having trouble finding employees. So there's some merit to the comment that was made earlier. But it is so frustrating to hear that every drive-through involves a McDonald's and a Taco Bell. There are Raising Cane's. Every use, whether it's Applebee's or anybody else, now has either a drive-through or a pull-up parking spaces so you can order. I don't care whether it's a high-end steakhouse where you can pull up and get your food. And like I say, I'm going to come to this meeting, and this place is going to be full next week, and I'm glad this whole discussion regarding land use has stopped, because it's the last bastion that I have as a real estate developer and a real estate owner in Wildwood to try and get this drive-through thing done. I'm really emotional about it. I have sat patiently and not said a word about it because I don't want to jeopardize my other development. But by golly, if we can't get drive-throughs here, the hell with my residential development. I'm just going to put a garage up there and keep my race cars in there. I don't care anymore. It's passionate, it's frustrating, and it is such a minimal use that impacts this city so infinitesimally that I just don't get it. We're now put roundabouts in to aid these kind of uses, and here we are making stupid decisions. I'm sorry if it offends anybody, but it's just stupid not to allow some drive-throughs on our primary access points. I read Julian's memo with great care, and he is very detailed. You are very fortunate in this city to have him. I hope you don't darn well lose him. But he was very specific about certain kind of uses and drive-throughs and things like that. We have a rule in real estate: 1 mile, 1 turn. If you can't get it in those areas, thank you, then you can't draw these uses. I'll stop, but I am very frustrated with this. I hope this board can look at it more succinctly, and those who aren't educated about it not follow around one ward person's comments and look and find out the facts for yourself, either through me, through your city staff, through Julian, through looking at the other cities. But I'm sorry, but that really got under my skin, and thank you for your time.
Are there any questions for the speaker? If not, is there a motion to adjourn? Joe, do you want to make any announcements before that?
No, I was going to wait till after the adjournment, and thank you for attending tonight. I'm sorry we went a little over. And just so you know, we'll finish the discussion of the Generation Drive area. We'll go back to the Taylor Road, Manchester Road discussion regarding the regulating plan that was tabled, and then we'll get back to land use activities. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, good.
Adjourned.
If I could just clarify the February meeting, it is to remain on the 11th. It will not be on Thursday.
Do we know when the March meeting will be? Are we turned off, Jeff?